well. I hope you are enjoying the beginning of autumn. I hope no one's been eating too many mince pies already. You might have noticed a few weeks ago that I started seeing them cropping up in the shops and was asking LinkedIn whether I should be getting them or not. I have not succumbed to that quite yet. The main focus for today is really to look at some of the tweaks and new directions CQC are going in. Now, many of you will know I haven't done one of these, certainly over the summer, certainly for at least a month or two. The reason is I know you're all really, really busy, and who really wants to listen to me chat about stuff that isn't that relevant? So over the summer, there have been a couple of movements, and I thought rather than kind of doing each one and kind of really talking for half an hour about nothing, it makes more sense to kind of wait until everyone's back in the zone, and then just bring up some of the things that have been cropping up over the summer. Now, there aren't massive shocks. There are a few little surprises we're going to go through. Again, happy to have questions in the chat. Obviously, most of you will know me directly via LinkedIn. I've got my email at the bottom of each slide as well. So do feel free to just get in contact if you want to raise anything. We have the chat there. Feel free to ask questions or to type anything that you wish to say in the chat, and hopefully we'll get around to those sorts of things. So we've got this CQC tweaks and potential new directions. The last slide, the last point, is a potential new direction CQC may be going in a particular area around the scoring we'll talk about in a moment. So we've got 6 tweaks, I think, all in total that we're just going to be looking at here. The first one, which quality statements? We know that this has been a bit of a headache. A lot of services we were originally introduced this idea of priority quality statements. These were kind of like the 5 quality statements that would almost always be undertaken. That kind of narrative has slipped away, and it doesn't seem to really appear anymore on any of CQC's work. And if you go through the reports, there is quite a mix. Now, it doesn't mean that those 5 priority quality statements aren't typically undertaken anyway. It's things like safeguarding and so on and so forth. But there doesn't seem to be as much of a kind of agreed these must be done universally. There's still a bit of a luck of the draw around which quality statements people are getting. We're hopefully in a couple of weeks going to have someone that I know very well coming on to have a talk with us. What they did is they actually challenged CQC. When CQC turned around and said, we're going to inspect you against 7 quality statements, they said, well, that's not going to change our rating. Can you do more? So they came back to him and said, yeah, we'll do 33 of them, every single one except for environmental sustainability. So that has kind of shown that you can challenge CQC around the number of quality statements. If you feel that actually you're coming to look at 10, but those 10 aren't really going to affect us. We do now have a couple of examples of people that have raised that at the beginning, whether it's kind of over the phone, that initial phone call, and as a result been inspected against more quality statements. So there is still some work to be done around agreeing the quality statements. We'll come to that in a moment when we talk about the handbook that is kind of on its way, apparently. Another thing that most of you probably clocked it, but you may have missed it if you were kind of busy or living La Vida Loca, having fun in Spain, or whatever you were doing over the summer. But there is an agreement now that if on your first inspection you get a 1 or 2 for any quality statement, then all of the quality statements in that key question will be reviewed the next time. The reason why that came about was there was a concern that what if you got rated a 2 in something, and then the next time they came and looked at you, they didn't bother reappraising that quality statement. And people realised they could get stuck on particular ratings if their quality statements weren't regularly or weren't reviewed a second time, particularly if they've got a 1 or a 2. So if you get inspected and 1 or 2 of your quality statements get a score of a 1, an inadequate, or a 2, an RI, then the next time around, those quality statements and all of the quality statements in that key question will be reviewed. So if you get a 1 or a 2 at quality statement level, that whole key question will be reviewed again the next time CQC come and do an assessment. Good news, because it means that as services, there's less likelihood of being stuck kind of in perpetuity on 1s or 2s because of individual or small numbers of quality statements. So just to kind of recap, the kind of priority quality statements seem to have been kind of subtly not removed, but toned down a bit. There's still a bit of a mix, but we are seeing that services are challenging the number of quality statements CQC are looking at and then seeing those increase. Alongside that, we know that if you get a 1 or a 2 in any quality statement, that whole key question will be reviewed and all the quality statements within it will be reviewed the next time CQC do an assessment. The next big kind of tweak or thing that's coming down the pipeline is the handbook. Now, this was originally going to come out in July. So they've actually been working on it for some time. But as we know, the DASH review came out, and that was kind of, well, a huge deal for CQC and for the sector. And as a result, CQC understandably hit the pause button and said, right, we will redo the handbook in view of more kind of co-production with the sector and in view of what CQC themselves have said in the DASH review. In terms of dates, it's going to be at least September, more likely October. There is still a survey open around co-production of the contents of this handbook that doesn't close until tomorrow. So tomorrow is when they close the survey about what should be in the handbook. So I think we can say at the very least, the end of September, more likely into October before that handbook comes our way. CQC have outlined exactly what that handbook will have. And actually, as long as it's delivered and it's delivered soon, it's going to be very valuable. Number one, what providers can expect from a CQC inspection. You know, bless them, you know, the sector's been relying on, you know, wonderful people like CLN and Skills for Care and all these other groups that have been doing these kind of webinars and discussions with people that have been inspected. A lot of people haven't really heard from CQC what to expect from a CQC inspection. So that will be laid out really clearly in the handbook. A shared understanding of what good looks like. So we know what the quality statements are. We know the 1, 2, 3, 4. But to what extent, what will give you that good for each sector, for each quality statement? Now, again, we'd always said that CQC had purposely tried to step back from that because they didn't want to be too prescriptive. But this is where it's the difference between a handbook versus legislation. They're not going to kind of create that massive Chloe prompt. Remember the kind of 70-page PDF document that was full of E1.3, E1.4. They're not doing that in this handbook, and a handbook is usually smaller than a proper book. In the handbook, they are going to identify what good looks like across the sectors, and hopefully at kind of a key question and maybe a quality statement level, but not in that prescriptive detail that we had with the old Chloe prompts and, you know, E1.4, E1.5, etc., etc. So we've got some more information coming down the line around what good looks like, which hopefully will be here in October, maybe November. Depends on what's come through from this survey they've been doing with everyone that closes tomorrow. A really big kind of shift is outlining the customer service standards that we as the sector should expect from CQC. Now, this has come because a lot of services have been comparing notes on what's happening and felt that, you know, different inspectors are still doing things slightly differently and there are still some challenges. So there's going to be some kind of clear expectations around what the customer service standards are that we should expect from CQC. And of course, the DASH review clearly emphasised the need for more clarity on what sector rights are and what we should expect from CQC, as the DASH review highlighted a number of the issues CQC were having in terms of how they related to the services they're inspecting. So a much clearer idea of how CQC are to be held to account, what standards we should expect from them in terms of the way they communicate with us and work with us. Most importantly, in my humble opinion, we also have the agreed frequency of assessments. And I would argue that agreed frequency also includes things like number of quality statements, because let's say you're going to assess a service every 2 years. Well, if it's every 2 years with 10 quality statements, that's different to every 1 year with 20 quality statements. So within that agreed frequency of assessments, we'll also hopefully start to see some advice around how many quality statements to expect, even if it's a minimum. It might be that they say we would expect a minimum of X per 2 years or X per year or X per 3 years. We will have to wait to see what the handbook says. So there's a lot of, if you think about it, CQC are almost at the 1 year mark. They started doing some of their kind of draft demo-y things around October. It all started to kick off kind of November, December, January, and then it kind of went through all the regions. So they're kind of looking at certainly the solid 6 months that they had from February onwards when we were all under it, but also really starting to do that reiteration. And they were very open about that. They said, look, we're going to have to look at some of this again because we'll roll it out and there'll be some things that work. There'll be some things that we haven't worked out yet that we need to agree and clarify. We are now at that point. So they're not chucking the whole thing in the bin. What they are doing is they're going, right, we now need to more clearly set what we expect and what our standards are. And I think the issue that CQC have had is that it's one of those things, until you can't really try before you buy, until you start rolling it out, visiting services, hearing the problems, seeing the issues, seeing the challenges, knowing how long it takes to inspect a quality statement. Until you go through that for some time with a range of services, actually something like a handbook can instantly be very out of date if errors are made. So hopefully we'll get a lot more information from the handbook soon. Another quick point, care staff feedback, still a very, very significant issue. We've been looking at a lot of the recent reports because we're doing a presentation as part of the care show in October. We'll be looking at kind of some of the themes that are coming through the most recent kind of last few months of reports. Something that we are seeing just in a general sense is that the centrality of care staff in particular, feedback from care staff in particular, quoting exactly what staff say, reporting on the number of staff they've spoken to, etc. We always knew that care staff were a big deal. We always knew that they were going to speak to care staff. This is consistently seen throughout many, many, many quality statements. It's no longer just a nice little, as we've always said, it's no longer a nice little, oh, let's have a chat with someone that works here. It is a central way that they are assessing services. What we have heard, that was interesting, is that some kind of more senior CQC people and leaders have been a bit surprised around how inspectors have gone quite gung-ho. We're kind of calling people at their home, calling people out of hours, sending, I've spoken about it many times, sending an email with 26 separate questions to care staff. There is definitely an awareness within CQC that some people have gone a little bit OTT, and maybe we need to work out and agree a clearer way of moving forward. Because again, we've heard CQC representatives say to care home managers they have a right to care staff personal phone numbers under regulation so-and-so. These are things that have kind of now trickled up, and some of the senior leaders in CQC have certainly mentioned that they are surprised at some of the ways that inspectors are gaining feedback from staff. So I think that's something that may appear in the handbook. Under that, what providers can expect from a CQC inspection. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more guidance on what we can and what we should expect and should kind of agree to, and what we perhaps need to challenge or to do some protections around. Obviously, just for 5 seconds, I'm going to mention what we do as Care Research. Obviously, all the work that we do with surveys for residents, families, staff and partners is a really great way of getting that feedback. And CQC have now been quoting our documents in their documents. So we now know a small number of our clients have been inspected, and our reporting documents, our evidence documents, have made it into those CQC reports. So they are taking note of what we do. And obviously we have the how to speak to a CQC inspector video course. If you're not sure what your staff would say, if CQC said, tell me about a safeguarding incident, or you don't know what they'd say, if they ask them, how do you know that staff are as safe during a night shift as they are during a daytime shift? If you don't know what your staff would say, get in touch with us. We've got a course that can really help staff communicate fairly and effectively during those CQC discussions, during those CQC interviews. So let's work around which quality statements are going. We've got the handbook coming through. There's a bit of a question mark around the extent and kind of the passion of the inspectors around gaining some of that feedback, and perhaps what is the best way to do that, and what is to be expected. Few more ones. Inspectors. As you will know, there was this kind of new model of the inspector and the assessor. And we always had the inspector was the person with the clipboard that turns around and stands there in real time and looks around. And then the assessor was kind of secretly sitting there behind their laptop, reading things and watching things and requesting documents and sending emails. And there was very much kind of an idea that the inspector and assessor were totally different roles. And the question mark that many people had is, how good are these assessors? Like, are they inspectors that are just kind of working from home, or are they just kind of quote unquote a lower level of individual who's going to be doing this assessor role, which could just be kind of data analysis and document collection? CQC, in part sparked by the DASH review, in part sparked by kind of the mass exodus of CQC staff, have decided to get rid of that split between assessor and inspector. There will still be someone sitting behind a computer asking for documents, asking for things, reviewing things, but they will now both be inspectors, and they will be at an inspector level of training, inspector level of skill. Essentially what they are doing is they are moving away that kind of implied difference between inspector and assessor, and now you've got two different types of inspector, the one that's there in person and the one that's there working remotely. And I'm guessing, although I don't know all the CQC ins and outs, there will be in the background there'll be things around kind of pay and training that will be brought into line so that both of those roles are of parity. CQC are doing this for a very simple reason. This split caused a real exodus and really was a challenge and was troubling. And CQC themselves have openly, in one of the emails that Katie had sent through from CQC, she says, you know, we are now re-engaging with some of our former CQC inspectors to try and literally bring them back now that the roles are not going down the split that they had done, which clearly caused issues for CQC staff. More importantly, as a result of that, inspection rates dropped by nearly 50%. So this kind of inspector assessor, whilst it might not seem a big deal to us moment by moment like some of these are, it's had a huge impact on the capacity of CQC to inspect services. This comes through into another area that CQC are having a bit of a rethink of, and that is relationship management. One of the challenges that has been raised frequently in the framework, and also the DASH review raised it in lots of other areas, is that a lot of people have been really upset by the kind of the breaking up of the relationship between a lead inspector and you as an individual service. And when we were doing a bit of a UK tour and doing our training, we found a real mix. We had some services, their inspector was almost like their best mate. They knew when they were going on holiday, and they'd send something on a Monday, and by the Tuesday they'd get the response they needed. Others, it was kind of like an absolute distant person that they never heard from. For others, it was quite a fractious or difficult and tricky relationship. And CQC were really trying to work out, how do we connect people better, because it seems to be a bit of a luck of the draw. If you've got a good relationship with your inspector, hunky-dory. If not, it can cause more problems. However, one of the challenges with the new inspector assessor regime was that actually people felt they didn't know who to go to. They didn't know who to contact. They didn't know who to speak to. If they had a genuine question, not raising a big safeguarding issue, not raising a huge calamity, but they just wanted to check, hey, this has happened, what do we do next? Or, hi, we're doing this, who do we notify? Any of those kind of broader, just kind of information-seeking questions, people felt at a bit of a loss around who to contact and who to go to. CQC have realised that that kind of loss of relationship has been really negative for the sector. It's been negative in terms of the experiences of services and managers, but also it's had an impact on CQC assessments, because if you can't raise an issue and you don't know who to raise it with, well, guess what? That issue doesn't get solved, and then it might crop up during your assessment. So what are CQC doing it? In true CQC style, they're doing a pilot. Hooray! So on Monday, 16th of September, they are running a new NHS pilot around a new relationship management strategy. Now you might say, well, I'm not in the NHS, Louis. Why should I care about this? It's important because it's the CQC trialling a new way, which they then wish to kind of fine tune and roll out to other sectors. So it gives us an indication of where CQC are going in their approach to relationship management. So let me explain kind of in summary what the NHS relationship management pilot is going to look like. So they are going to introduce a named provider oversight lead as a point of contact. So having that specific person, Bob Smith or Geraldine, whatever, or whoever, anyone, whatever their names are, having that person, that is your person. You contact them. You have a question, you email them. You have a concern, you email them. You're not sure about something, you email them. Having that singular point of contact back. So that's a big tick, as that's a major issue that a lot of services have been concerned about. Interesting other tweak, whether these will survive in other sectors or whether it's specifically an NHS approach, it certainly is innovative and new, regular scheduled engagement meetings. So instead of it being kind of a bit of a luck of the draw, oh, I'll ping so-and-so an email and maybe they'll get back to me, maybe they won't, actually having regular scheduled engagement meetings with that point of contact. And, it gets a little bit more meaty here, agreed agendas for those meetings. And those agendas can be developed by you, they can be developed by them in collaboration with you. What we're seeing here is we're moving away from the ad hoc, oh, hey, so-and-so, can I just check this and that, to something that's a little bit more organised, a little bit more democratically led. It's not based on, who do they know best or whose email came first, that there is a set time to meet more regularly with that point of contact and to agree what those relationships, and what that meeting is to be about. Now, this is a pilot. It's starting on Monday within the NHS, but it gives an indication of where CQC are going, number one. And number two, CQC, as part of this discussion, have said, we plan to work with other sectors soon, and I think they mentioned September, to design a relationship approach that works for them. Now, you might be sitting there going, well, I run a 20-bed care home, or I run a 20-service care home, but I can't get CQC to listen just to me. Please go to all of your wonderful membership organisations. Skills for Care, they have a seat at the table. They meet with CQC at least 2 or 3 times a year. NCF, they're always in their ear. If it's around well-being and care worker experience, Care Workers Charity have a seat at the table. If you feel like there's things that are really important you want to raise, but you feel that it's just going to be lost in an email inbox with 4 million other emails, go to your membership organisations, go to Skills for Care, go to the Care Workers Charity, go to your local, if you kind of, Kicker is the one in my area, the Kent Integrated Care Alliance, go to these other groups that we know have a seat at the table. NCF is another big one as well, of course, and make it clear what you feel these engagement relationship management approaches should be, because that way it will be passed on. There is, if you look through your emails, there was an email that included good old friends, the survey. CQC did send out a survey asking the sector, how do you want to relate with us? What do you want this relationship to look like? Have a little look through. It'll be a couple of emails ago. There's a little link. You can select what sector you're in, and you can explain, kind of answer some questions around how you feel the relationship should be managed. What we can say at this moment in time, number one, CQC have realised their relationship management approach isn't working. Number two, they're not just talking about it, they are actually doing something about it. And number three, what we can see with this NHS approach is it gives us a clue of the angles it could go down, whilst they're openly saying we are going to work with other sectors to design a relationship approach that works for them. That's a direct quote from that press release. So there is some change of foot around relationship management. Again, let's be really frank here. Is it going to be this side of Christmas that this is all rolled out and perfect? Highly doubt. But we can at least be part of the discussion, and we can at least have some confidence that the relationship issues that we're currently kind of been struggling with aren't going to last forever. It's been raised by the sector, it's been raised by the data review, and they are actively making changes. Now, here's where I get to the most controversial bit, and we're nearly done, because I know we've all got on the lunch breaks and so on and so forth. What I'm about to suggest is something that CQC have been talking about. It is not in any way whatsoever a guaranteed done deal. But there is a little discussion about the evidence category scoring. So as you'll know, you've got your quality statements, and then under your quality statements, you've got your different evidence categories. And as you can see from the example down here, typically you get a score for each evidence category. So a 4 for people's experiences, a 4 for feedback from staff and leaders, a 3 for feedback from partners, and that all comes together to create a final score. The challenge that CQC have raised, and they're not going back on it, they're not publicly saying we're not doing this anymore, but they are raising the question. They feel that that evidence scoring approach is one of the reasons that there have been such long delays to the publication of reports. Because if you're not just scoring the 34 quality statements, you're also scoring, 4, 5 evidence categories. Do 30, do 20 times 4, and you can see that suddenly there's quite a lot of individual work to do to get the scores for each done. And then someone raises a criticism and says, oh, I don't like you gave us a 2 for feedback from partners. Here's a whole bunch of extra evidence. Suddenly they've got to do that again. So you can see, whilst I don't fully agree with it, and we don't know whether it's going to happen yet, but we know they've openly discussed it in certain meetings, but they haven't formally made this decision. We know there is a question mark over whether the individual evidence category scorings will continue in this way. The concern being it's holding everything up. We, as Care Research, we always quite liked it, and a lot of services we explain this to liked it, because what you do have with the evidence categories is you know exactly why you got the score you got. Because you can look at those evidence categories and go, okay, in this case, our feedback from partners let us down because it's a 2. And you can challenge more specifically, because instead of just challenging the whole quality statement, you can go, right, you gave us a 2 for feedback from partners. Here's some partners' feedback that we feel you didn't properly consider. So there are some benefits, I think, from a service perspective of having the individual evidence category scored. But it's a wider question around the weighting around, is it causing too much delay? Is it causing too long a time between completion of an inspection and publication of a report? That's the question. It's not a decision, it's not been made, but it is a question that is, in a broad sense, being pondered. Is probably the best word to explain. Just before I go to our last slide, I can see a few comments here. NCF recently gave members an opportunity to meet with and discuss the thoughts with Mike Richards, which was very useful. Great. Yep, Susie, I love NCF. I think they're a really great organisation. And again, if you have any thoughts about this and you don't know how to be heard, whether it's about the new relationship management ideas, whether it's about the possible tweaks to the scoring, whether it's about the handbook and kind of how staff are spoken to, your membership groups, NCF, Skills for Care, these are really great places to be heard. Kelly John's made a really good point. There should not be a score attached to those evidence categories. They should use all of that feedback to confirm or not finding the inspections and use it to inform the score of the assessment. I like that. So I get your point there. The idea is the inspector does an inspection and then the evidence kind of confirms or denies what they've said you're suggesting, rather than them building the response. I think that's a really interesting point, particularly around what is the place of these evidences. Is the place of the evidences to confirm or deny what inspectors have found? Or is the place of the evidence to build what they find? And what does that mean in terms of scoring versus not scoring, in terms of the order, in terms of how, where, when, why? I think it's what they've put together is a really good system from a scoring and points-based perspective. But the reality of undertaking that has proved challenging, and this evidence level scoring seems to be something that's being raised as a possibility for review. Yes, so another really good point there around Ofsted. Obviously, we all know the awful story of the head teacher who died by suicide as a result of the single word downgrading of their school service, and Ofsted have always kind of used these single service terms, certainly for as long as I was in education when I was in schooling. There is discussion over whether that approach of getting rid of the one word assessment could move on to CQC. Whether it will, I think, is going to be very much up to kind of what the reviewers, what the government feel about this transition. Also, I think there will be benefits and challenges. There is some value as someone picking a home for their relative of having a couple of words to hang on to. It's quite hard to read through, for example, 34 quality statements, all of their paragraphs, and then you coming up to your own decision around the extent to which that service is good for your relative or not. Either way, definitely this whole idea of how do we put numbers and words to assessments in a way that is fair, that is valuable, that is effective, both for services and for people receiving care, that in a much wider sense is certainly being thought through and considered. And at the moment, in a practical sense, the scores for the evidence categories is one of those specific areas. Right, I've spoken really, really quickly. I hope people understand what I have said. I believe, recorded it, so I'll be putting this on YouTube. So if you've missed it, or you just had such a fabulous time that you'd like to watch it all over again, it will be up tomorrow. Typically, I put it on for people that weren't able to make it today. Obviously, I know you're not going to watch it for fun. If you do want to get in touch, obviously, you know what we do. We do training around the framework. We do help with evidence and feedback evidence surveys for residents, families, staff partners. Or if you feel that your care staff needs some help and coaching around how to speak CQC, we've got our video course. Or if you just have a question about all of this sort of stuff, you just want to ask something about CQC, do please get in touch. You can email us research@careresearch.co.uk, or if you go on LinkedIn, I mean, most of you have found me via LinkedIn anyway. But if you do go on LinkedIn and type in my name, you should find me there. I hope that's been useful. I hope that's been valuable. I hope that it's got some thinking around where we're heading. There are tweaks and changes. We always knew there would be some tweaks and changes. That is the nature of any kind of big project rollout. Hopefully you can take this and kind of start to think through what it means for you and your service. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll be doing another one of these. I really want to be speaking with a colleague I've met who had 33 of their quality statements reviewed, and I want them to take us through the evidence they submitted for them. So that's what I'm hoping to do in the next couple of weeks, and obviously I'll let you all know when that happens. Have a lovely rest of your Wednesday. Any questions, any issues, do ping me an email, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. I'll stay online here, so if anyone does want to ask any questions, or if they have anything they want to talk to me about before the end of the session, that is fine. I'm going to stop the recording so that nothing that's said will be recorded.